Hi, and welcome back to Plastic Models by a Regular Dude and part 2, condensed, of the Dragon 1/35 scale SdKfz 251/21 Ausführung D drilling. The reason I'm calling this part 2 condensed is because that's what it's going to be. If you want to watch the full-on build of this kit, part 2 that is, I will put a link on the end screen of this video so you can click on it and watch all 60 plus minutes in all its glory. This is just going to be a recap of what I did, any challenges I ran into, and how I took care of them. So, without further ado, let's take a look. Alright, so obviously we're going to start with part 1. And that is the lower hull and these interior parts here. An engine, I'm assuming a fuel tank, battery, and a small fitting subassembly that I will talk more about in a later step. So here are all the parts in place, and they'll fit, no problems. I did not paint them because this is going to be entirely covered by this floor plate, so I did not see the need. Don't know why there's parts underneath there, but maybe on a different version of this kit, you can see the inside of it. I don't know. But anyway, I did build it all, assemble it, put it in there. Good to go. Now, this subassembly here, as I say, I will talk about it a little bit more later. However, I did assemble it and I put it in place. But in hindsight, I would have done it differently. More to come. Photo etch. So we have these photo etch strips that go along the side here. And as you can see, hopefully in the video, there are square cutouts. And here is a piece of it here. Yes, I said a piece. These square cutouts here and one here are supposed to line up with some holes in the plastic on this whole lower part. When put in place, it doesn't line up. So if this piece here is aligned thusly, then the rest of this, which are these cutouts, do not line up with these holes that are in the hull. And there are parts right here that have to fit in those holes. And if the photo etch were left in place, it would not be possible to glue those in squarely. They would be lopsided because some of these holes are like right on the edge of this photo etch. So with that in mind, I ended up just chopping that off. This part here, it's not even visible. So this is one of those cases where I think it's photo etch for photo etch sake, not for actual improvement of the kit, because all of this photo etch is going to be completely invisible, with the exception of this right here, possibly. I'll know more later. But anyway, so unless you just really want it on there, I would save myself the trouble and not install it at all. It's not structural. It doesn't make up gaps to make things fit better. If anything, it's a detriment. So that's just one of those things. That's why I chose to do it. So that concludes step number 1. Step number 2 is where we glue the idler adjustments. This plate right here that goes underneath, and the suspension torsion bar swing arms. So let's talk about this part here first. So this part right here, it fits fine. Mine was kind of bowed, and I think perhaps it was just on that particular part, because I have 2 of them, and this one's bowed the opposite way. This one here was bowed to where it ramped out, so I had to glue it here first and then apply glue down here and clamp it down here. This one is bowed the opposite way. It's bowed to where it would be like up like that. So I don't know. I don't know, maybe this kit got hot in storage somewhere or something, but the plastic is soft enough. It's super easy to glue it into place, and it's not a problem. I do not consider that really a detriment to the kit. It's just something to watch for if you have this kit yourself. So then these glued into place very easily. C1 and C2, they are here and here. And then D32, which is, I'm assuming it's a toe pintle of some kind, and I glued that on the very last thing. As a matter of fact, I just glued that on a little while ago. So, and the reason I did is because it does protrude. It's kind of small and fragile, so I saved it for last. The swing arms, in order to get those nice and flat and level so all the wheels are touching the ground, I used my own homegrown jig. And what I did is I got my cutting mat here, my Infinity cutting mat, and this little piece of plastic to make up the thickness of this piece right here. So I laid this to where this was resting on it, and then I put it up against this. Now obviously the wheels weren't there, and glued everything into place, and then slid it over to where just the axles were resting on top of this. Okay, so it looks something like that. And using my straight edge, I just mashed them down, made sure they were all perfectly flat, parallel to the ground, the axles, perpendicular to the side of the hull, and everything squared up. So I did one side at a time, and let it dry up really good, and voila, that was it. Now the reason I had to do that is although it does have two locating pins, a large locating pin right here, there's a large locating pin and a small locating pin on the torsion arm that fits in here. It's not a super snug positive connection. It's nice and flat, so you're able to get it, you know, to where everything's squared up, but there is movement, so you can't rely on those little pegs to keep everything square. That's why I did it like that. And that concluded step 2. Then we had step 3, which is the front suspension parts right here. Now, I was not going to glue that in at first, but there's enough space in there to get paint in with an airbrush that I figured it'd be okay. But I did make sure, and I would suggest the same, these two parts, C10 and C11, make sure that glue only gets on the contact point here and not where it touches the actual leaf spring here, because I wanted it free moving, so that way when I put the wheels on and I set it on the table, the wheels will both, I'll have movement side to side like this, so the wheels will both be touching the surface of the ground, desk, whatever you want to call it. These parts here, C35, are also intended to be movable, but I glued mine in place because I don't care about this type of movement with the wheels. I just want to make sure they're level and facing straight ahead. Now the instructions right here are not very clear. It shows this part right here, C20, gluing onto this pin right here, and then gluing onto this bottom stabilizing bar, or whatever you call it there. That is totally incorrect. So if you look here at this illustration, you can see that this part right here, there is a rod in between these two parts here that fit in between these two semicircles here. So that's what gives you your ability to turn the wheels if you want. So this is a case where you got to look at all the instructions because this does not make sense. Because where this is showing is supposed to be glued there, that is actually where this tie rod goes here. It snaps into place on these 2 points, which allows it to turn, and it makes the wheels turn together. Okay, now I did not set mine up to do that, and I probably would have been hard pressed to do it anyway, because one of these pins right here that this tie rod snaps onto was not there. I don't know if it broke off or if it was short shot or what, so I just glued it in place. You know, that looks wonky right there, but it's going to be underneath. You're not going to be able to see it anyway behind the wheels. And I was able to glue it on that side. So everything glued, fit into place. This part here, C11, C10, it drops into a little slot and it fits nicely. And I was able to glue it up and good to go. All right. So that brings us to the next part of step 3 here, which is gluing that part in. So I did that, but I did not glue the wheels in. I will not do that until one of the last things I do in this project. But they do fit into place. Now, if you put these wheels on right now, here, I'm not gonna push them in all the way, and here, you can see what I'm talking about. You set it down, and that way the swiveliness makes those tires sit flat. But, and you can't see it, let me see if I can show you. We're using this right here. If you'll notice, the front road wheels do not touch the ground. It's like, oh, did I do something wrong? Are they uneven? No, they are not. And here's why. Because the tracks, the thickness of the tracks, is going to lift that up. Because of the tracks and the track pads and all that, will make up that difference to where that will all sit flush. Hopefully that makes sense. All right. So that took care of all the wheels. Now there's a number of different types of wheels that you have to do. There's the doubles and then the spread apart ones with the doubles in between. So but before you glue those in, it's a good idea, and I forgot, I had to do it later. D25 are these like little support looking things. They fit in those holes that are partially obstructed by that photo etch I was talking about earlier. So I glued those in after I had glued the wheels. Now, with all that, let's get back up to this part right here. So as I said, if I had it to do over again, I wouldn't have done it like this. I would have glued this on the hull like it shows, but I would have left these parts off, because on these torsion bar swing arms, there's a tab that fits into this part right here. And I show all this in the detailed video that I'll have a link at the end of this one for. So if you really want to check it out, you'll have to go over there. But it fits into that linkage. So knowing that now, and my suggestion would be for anybody else, so you're not having to twist and break things off and re-glue them, glue this part on, glue the torsion bar swing arm on. Now nowhere does it show that this goes into that part. I just figured it out just by looking at it. But glue the torsion bar into place. Once that is all dried up and set up, then assemble those two small parts there where they go. One attached to this part that's on the hull, which in turn, this one here attaches to that, then this attaches to that, the bottom of that attaches to the torsion bar. That is what I would do doing it over again. But again, like I say, I talk about it in detail in the other video. But with that, that completes step 3, except for this part C8 right here. And that I'm not going to do until I have the tracks, tires, and everything in place and set the way I want before I install that part right there. So that'll come a little bit later. So that concludes step number 3. And then step number 4, not a whole lot going on except for finishing up the wheels. Now it shows here to put the half wheel on there, on those 3 axles, and then to put these doubles where they go, and then glue these on top of the first ones that were installed. I didn't do that. I assembled all this stuff off of the vehicle. And the reason being is these here, the ones that have the big spacing, there is a ring with a notch in it on one of them, and on the other side there's a key that fits into that notch. Now that key that fits into that notch is just a little bit tall, so I had to trim it back. Again, something I talked about in detail in the other video, but I had to trim it off a little bit to where the ring with the notch in it made solid contact all the way around with the mating portion of the outside part of the wheel. So that way I was able to get them nice and parallel, because if you glue them together, that key cocks them a little bit like that. So that was my solution. And then once they're all assembled, it's still easy to get them on there. You just kind of interleave them. You put one of these on kind of loosely, then put this on, just barely get it started, put the next one, get it started, and so on down the line, and they'll all pop into place. And then once I had them all positioned and ready to glue, I hadn't glued them yet, using these 2 clamps here, I made myself a nice little jig, pushed everything. This is tall enough and it fits everything well enough that I was able to push it together, and that got all the wheels standing up straight and lined up this way. And then once I had it together, then I took my Tamiya extra thin and then just went through, touched a little bit of cement to each one of those axles and let it sit till it was dry. Now it's all nice and solid, and it will be able to withstand installing tracks and painting and all the other fun stuff that's still got to happen. Then, now if you'll notice, these wheels are painted. Well, there's a reason for that. These aren't the drive sprockets that came with this kit. I could not get... I tried to glue it first when I should have test fit better. These 2 halves, this half and this half, were not coming together all the way. There was a big gap, and I could not get that gap closed up. But I had already glued this and this on there. So I should have put these 2 halves together, made sure they fit, then glued them to these differential covers or whatever they are. Final drives, I think maybe is what they're called. These final drives, and then glued it in place. So I did it kind of backwards. Fortunately, I had some spares. These were already assembled from a kit I had done before, but I hadn't used them for some reason, and voila, I was able to glue those into place. And that concludes step number 4. That also concludes this video. So I hope you enjoyed this condensed version of this. Like I said earlier in the video, if you want to see the full-on detailed build step by step of all this stuff we've discussed in this video, there will be a link on the end screen so you can go and watch. Like I said, it's a little bit over an hour, but it takes every bit part by part. Some people like that. So anyway, I hope you enjoyed this condensed version, and next time when I come back, we'll start right here at step number 5 with the interior of the vehicle and move on into the superstructure itself. So as always, thanks for watching Plastic Models by a Regular Dude and part number 2, condensed, of the Dragon 1/35 scale SdKfz 251/21 Ausführung D drilling. So until next time, thanks for watching, and I will see you all later.